Hello, my name is Ana Maria Copete Maccagnan, and I'm happy to present our paper Stitching Participations in a Touch-Oriented Participatory Design Practice at this year's Participatory Design Conference. The paper was written together with Professor Guilherme Meyer from Unicinos. In this paper, our interest was to discuss that, despite the importance of participatory design literature concerned with democracy as a process of engaging through what arises from or in response to problems experienced in the situation, we identified the need to design alternative ontologies and relational modes, which enables us to listen to other urgencies. In the paper, we propose an experiential and fellowship instance by invoking touch and sentient aspects to craft new understandings of participation within a design process. When reading the work of Christina Hook with other authors, we understood that this shift instance is meant to be experiential, felt, and aesthetic, engaging with the realities of our subjectivities, sensations, feelings, emotions, and values. Therefore, the main objective of our paper and our presented practice was to explore other ways of thinking participation by reclaiming a sensorial experience. We invoke touch within a design process guided by the question how we can think about other ways of doing participatory design through touch. We resort especially to the concept of touch proposed by Maria Puigli de la Casa. Likewise, we notice approximations with the concept of sentir pensar proposed by the Colombian sociologist Orlando Falsborda and the concept of correspondence proposed by Tim Ingold. We report in our paper on episodes of an experimental prototyping practice carried out through embroidery group. The explorations of this case led us to nurture the relationship between mind, body, and world, introducing the idea of a touch-oriented participatory design (TOPD) when considering participation attentive to various rhythms, making democracy through storytelling and an ethos of care. To think about participation through touch, our work draws on perspectives from participatory design and the concept of publics regarding a democratic understanding. In summary, we wanted to emphasize that the interesting thing about this approach is the difference between enabling participation and the constitution of publics, which lies in the preliminary framing of issues and participants, as opposed to a more sensitive, spontaneous, and experimental involvement. For us, a participatory approach with an emphasis on a democratic basis becomes a way to raise questions and highlight controversies and dilemmas. It becomes stimulating for design to generate opportunities for participation oriented not by shared visions, but by different voices, pronunciations, discussions, and continuous engagement. Through these occasions, points of view can be expressed, invented, and constructed, or transformed, while those conflicted ones are considered favorable without necessarily being unified. This mode of participation points to a design process that guides forces in keeping spaces open for others, that is, creating an environment conducive to expression. And here we resort to Stenger's concept of cosmopolitics, which implies considering other according to the notion of the idiot. In this sense, for us, participation must be built as a practice of continually questioning certainties and habitual ways of relating to others. For that, we must slow down to cultivate a distinct sensibility, hesitating to construct a common and detached world. The concept of touch for us is the possibility of establishing these other rhythms. It invites awareness to the embodied character of perception, affect, and thinking. It is crucial to think about design process based on touch because it is concerned with producing knowledge from other sensibilities. Touch invites us to be more aware of how to live and how to relate because beyond evoking a specific and forceful sensorial experience, it also has affective charge. It emerges from contact with the world, being a process through which body learns, evolves, and becomes. Touch can also be a way of proposing to sentir pensar, a process of knowing no longer fragmented or disciplinary but interrelated to reality and emotional knowledge. To adopt sentient aspects of design means placing together different ways of perceiving reality, where actions and thoughts are intertwined with emotions, feelings, desires, and affections. Similar to this perspective, Ingold introduced that if today our world is in crisis, we have engaged in campaigns of interaction and forgotten how to correspond. For him, to endure the condition of noticed correspondence, we need a relative quietude. In our paper perspective, I slow down. Finally, in the paper we discussed an experimental prototyping practice oriented by touch. We performed this practice in 2020 and organized it in 4 experimentation cycles, where participants engaged in an activity mediated by embroidery or involved in a dynamic to think together and together with what was being made. Embroidery, in that sense, proposed an accessible way of inviting people to discuss live. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we structured the activity to online meetings held at Zoom and exchanged a box of embroidery materials between 6 participants. The cycles were 4 moments of 15 days each. It started with receiving the materials box instructions, and then the participants were encouraged to create freely. Afterwards, we had an online meeting to talk about what they have created. At the end of each cycle, we randomly exchange the kits between participants. The test that guided the practice was for participants to imagine and create something that would express their life, experience, and feelings in isolation under the circumstances they were in. In the paper, we report some episodes of the practice, starting from the moment where each participant unfolded a theme based on their unique experience, boosting a personal and reflective nature of the practice. One participant, for example, decided to do a timeline with the dates of the pandemic. The dates since she arrived from Montevideo, highlighting birthdays and the day her mother left. Other participants prefer to start embroidering from what emerged after touching the materials. Unlike the idea of representing, the hand in contact with the materials brought out memories and sensations. The desire to explore the materials characterized an experimental process in which ideas about embroidery arose through making. For another participant, the touch of the material brought out memory of her mother working with wool. In our description, we cover the forward meetings, where participants receive the work from others. During the Zoom meetings, they describe their creations from the receipt of the box already touched by someone else. The notion of participation was intertwined with the idea of continuity. Appearing in the speech of some participants was the idea of completing a drawing from traces that had been left behind. Continuity was a form of corresponding to other and an imaginative narrative, adding new elements to the collective creation at hand. Touch also suggests getting involved with the situation, characterizing a process where the work was changing every week, not only by the influence of what emerged during the practice, but outside it. For example, one participant portrayed the fires in the Brazilian Pantanal biome. The way this embroidery crossed this narrative with the situation represented what she was feeling and mobilized others. In our discussion section, we highlighted some of our learnings from this practice. Extending the idea of touch as participation helps us to think about an experimental process attentive to various rhythms. By inviting participants to embroidery, touch and gain distance from their daily workloads, speed and rhythm, we establish an immersive atmosphere during the meetings and individual moments of making. The fact that embroidery has proposed slowing down seems to have created the occasion for a slightly different sensitivity to develop tools for noticing. Strategy as deceleration allowed them to feel, dialogue, and access other modes of attention. Our practice seems to also promote a process of making democracy through storytelling, a dynamic in which individual narratives intersect from the participants' relationship with the embroidery. This can be thought of storytelling in the sense of new imaginary events are mixed with narrated facts. Therefore, by emphasizing a dimension of touch and a process of sentipensar with the territory, the narratives that manifest themselves because of the embroidery were not representations, but something that was built and constituted from the point of view of each participant, the circumstance of the environment, and that correspond to the other. Lastly, with our practice, we were able to embrace an ethos of care. According to Maria Puigli de la Bella Casa, this ethos advances from a predetermined question about how we can care more, to ask how to care and what is caring, for us also, how to touch. The whole level of discussions presented in the practice were only possible because of the ability to establish relationships through touch. Touch was a physical sensation, human to material, and an affection presented, including during the dialogues. Thus, touch meant embodying care. Materiality was a substitute for the body, as participants sent each other's feelings, hugs, and worldviews through the threads and their tangled compositions. To conclude, this paper was dedicated to starting a discussion about ways of doing participatory design, engaged with touch and a sentient design perspective, to favor sensorial and sensible aspects of a design process. We understood that touch overlaps the idea of participation. Our proposal of a touch-oriented participatory approach, TOPD, was to create opportunities to integrate emotions and rationality. Designers who wish to adopt such a proposal should establish a practical environment engaged with bodily activities of making together through a slow-down strategy. We invite researchers to engage with other touch-oriented participatory practice as a way of creating new relations between communities and proposing new forms of making and being together by allowing ourselves to be touched and affected by those and everything that surrounds us. Thank you.